Okay, uh, it's draft time. Woohoo! Um, I'm always, I'm always happy the draft comes for two reasons. One is just I'm excited to see what new players the Vikings get. But two, I'm always excited because it means it's the end of mock draft season. It's the end of draft speculation season. It's the end of you know player profile season. And look, I know people love this shit. So there's some people who just love nothing more than to just pretend like they're scouting players and reading up on all these players. I think that's just the biggest fucking waste of time in the world. Like, why do you do it? Like, by now, these people who love to do it, just the non-professionals, you've looked up hundreds of players. You've probably looked at hundreds of players, lots of highlights and everything. As of now, the Vikings have 10 picks. At most, they're going to end up with, they had an all-time record last year. I doubt they're going to end up with as many as last year. They'll end up somewhere, probably more than 10, but less than 15, so let's say 12. So they're going to end up with, at most, maybe 12 or 13 players. I suppose that you also got the college free agents after that, but, they're not going to end up with most of these players, so you've just wasted your time. I don't know. People like it. It's harmless. It doesn't hurt anybody. But I'm very glad that that's going to be done. And I like the mock. I played around with the mock draft simulators online quite a few times. They're fun to do, but come on, it's ridiculous. So, what are the Vikings going to do in the draft? I don't know, and you don't know. I know we've got all the narratives that Zimmer's going to draft a cornerback, or Zimmer's not going to allow Spielman to draft an offensive player at all early in the draft. You've seen enough from me, about me and narratives. I'm not a big fan of narratives, especially when they're very, very wrong. The other narrative, of course, being that Spielman just is willfully ignoring the offensive line and has for years. Not true. But as far as the offseason coming into the draft, it's been very, very clear to me with what they've done that their priority in free agency was defense, defense, defense. That was where they were going to make their big moves. In free agency was to shore up this defense that was a fucking disaster last year. Getting some guys back, but you need more than just the returning guys. And look, I think they've done. I've made videos about just most of the big signings. I think they've done a very, very good job. With the offseason to this point, at least as far as the defense goes, which is most of their moves. I think we're going to see a major turn, even if they don't draft a single defensive player this weekend. I think they're going to have a major improvement on defense, just with what they've already done, like very, very major. So people freaking out. To me, it's pretty clear that it's just that was their focus in free agency, that they felt they could get. That they could make more moves and do more good doing, using their salary cap money for defensive moves. And that's fine. Like the people who wanted them to go spend every dollar that they would have possibly had under the cap to sign like a Joe Thuney or I guess trade for an Orlando Brown, okay, they could have maybe done that, but then they wouldn't have been able to do any of this other shit. And so they've done it now. They've done their big defensive stuff. I don't think that means they're not going to draft anything on defense in the draft, but I really do believe they're going to prioritize offense, specifically the offensive line. Obviously, everyone's going to say it over and over, the offensive line. I think they're set up pretty well. If you go by the mock drafts, and I don't know if you do, there's a pretty good chance they're going to have a few guys to pick from, and I'm not going to list the names. I barely even know the names. But I think they're going to be in a position where they can kind of have the best of both worlds, if they stay at 14. And there has been talk that they're one of the teams that's maybe trying to move up. I don't believe Spielman has ever moved up, like in the upper reaches of the first round before. He moved up into the first round to draft Teddy years ago. I don't believe he's ever moved up, like in the top half of the draft like that. That's not really his thing. His thing is usually, trade back a little, collect some more picks, and then use those other picks to move around. I'm sure he's going to do that again this year. That's why, as of now, they have 10 picks. Of course, they lost one. They had to forfeit a 7th rounder. That hurts Spielman, but they're gonna do their fair share of wheeling dealing like they always do. But I don't know. They don't have a 2nd round pick. They got a couple 3rds, but they don't have a 2nd rounder like that. If you want to move up in the draft from where they are, like at 14, if they want to move up to 10 or 8 or whatever, you probably have to give up your 1st rounder next year. Because I don't think giving up a 3rd is going to do it in that situation. I don't see that happening. I mean, you never know. Something could really fall in their laps. A player could fall. I mean, last year players fell. Justin Jefferson fell in their lap. But I don't really see them moving up. Just because I don't think they really have the draft capital to do it. And I just don't see them giving up a 1st rounder next year, to move up to draft a tackle. I just don't see that. But I think they're going to be in a position if they stick at 14, where they'll have some good options. Maybe they'll trade down a little bit. They've certainly done that before. Maybe try to collect maybe an extra 2nd or 3rd or something like that. Something to kind of give them a few more cracks at it. But I do think people want to think that Spielman is just ignorant of the offensive line. Of course he knows what is needed on the offensive line, and that doesn't guarantee they're going to draft a lineman with their 1st round pick. I think the fucking fan base and media are going to lose their fucking minds if he doesn't draft an offensive lineman with their 1st pick. But, it depends on the pick. It depends on who's there. I'm not going to, sometimes you draft for need and it blows up in your face. Sometimes you draft best player available and it's great. I think most people think the top needs coming in are, offensive line, either guard or tackle, and most people still think the pass rush. Although I don't know that I agree that pass rush at this point is that big of a deal, unless it's just they have doubts about Hunter coming back and being his old self. That could be a thing. But I think they have enough. If Hunter is back as his normal self, that he'll be able to, they'll be able to figure out the second pass rush. And obviously, the other big question mark that's been put out there now is cornerback, thanks to Jeff Gladney. There really hasn't been any more news on that that I've heard. But for the people who wanted him cut, fucking Antonio Brown just re-signed with Tampa Bay, I think today. So I don't want to hear this shit about how, what he did, and I believe he did it, means you have to cut him right away, because this is the NFL, frankly, and look at they've let this guy be in the league for years. So, but the Gladney thing could be taken out of their hands. He might end up on that exempt list. He might just not, just be a regular suspension. He might not be able to play, at least for some of the year. I still, even if you lose him, I don't think cornerback. I don't think cornerback is a big enough need, certainly to reach for a cornerback in the first round. There've been a couple names that have been mentioned, but they would probably have to fall to the Vikings, and I wouldn't rule it out. And I almost cringe at the thought of us drafting a cornerback, not because it would be a bad pick, but just because then you'd hear Zimmer drafting the cornerback. Like, give us a fucking break. Of course, you're going to draft a lot of cornerbacks in the NFL with what the NFL is right now. Like, they've used 3 first-round picks on cornerbacks in the Zimmer era. Like, because he didn't draft Rhodes. That was the year before he got here. You drafted Waynes. I think that was a good pick. You drafted Hughes. That hasn't worked out due to injury. I mean, the guy's just never on the field. And you drafted Gladney, and looked like that Gladney was on his way to working out, and we'll see. But that's very much up in the air. But I almost cringe if we draft I mean, look, Vikings fans are going to fucking complain no matter what we do. We could draft Patrick Mahomes on Thursday, and they'll complain. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they're just they're hardwired to complain. I don't know that there's a move, like a position that they could do in the first round that I would be like, oh my god, what the hell are they doing? If they drafted a tackle or a guard, I'm good with that. If they draft a pass rusher, I'm good with that. I don't think they would draft an interior defensive lineman at this point. If one of these cornerbacks kind of falls in their lap, I could be okay with that. I don't think they would draft a safety. Some of these other positions, there's no way. Like, I know that there had been talk maybe they would even draft a receiver. I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't. Best player available. I'm always good with best player available early in drafts, but I really don't think they have. I don't think they have the need for a receiver that some people do, because I think they're going to be utilizing tight ends a lot more in the passing game next year anyway. So I don't think you need to have like 5 receivers. I'm hoping that they do draft one of the linemen if they're there, because I think that's, kind of a no-brainer. But again, we'll see who's there. But yeah, it's going to be infuriating to watch the fan base whine no matter what they do, because whatever they do is going to be wrong. Obviously the big wild card would be a quarterback. A lot of people have their hearts set on us drafting a quarterback in the first round. I don't think that's going to happen. Like, I don't think even if one of these 5 guys kind of falls into their lap, to me, that's when you trade. That's when you trade down with somebody who's, if 1 or 2 of these quarterbacks is still there, and it would probably be Lance and Mac Jones, if you get down that far, like, if you got 1 or 2 of those guys there, there's going to be some team below you in the draft who's desperate to get up and get a quarterback. That's when you swing a trade, move down a little bit, take advantage of some team being desperate for a quarterback, because we are not desperate for a quarterback. I know people fucking hate Kirk Cousins. I've complained about it so many times that I've lost count, but we're in no hurry to replace Kirk Cousins. We're just not. And none of these quarterbacks, I'm telling you, you got 5 quarterbacks probably going in the first round. I guarantee a minimum 2 of them are going to fucking flop. And, you're building a pretty damn good roster back up here. Are you going to fucking waste all that drafting a bust quarterback? I mean, you've got there's no chance that all 5 of these guys hit. It's just never happened. Like even the great drafts in the history of the NFL, great quarterback drafts in the history of the NFL, there's still at least 1 or 2 of them who are a flop. There's still a Todd Blackledge, in the, how's that, pulling that name off out of the top of my head. There's always going to be 1 or 2 of these guys that flop, and maybe Lance and Jones will be the best of the bunch. I don't know, but I'm not, and I don't think they are either. I really don't think I really don't think that they are as a franchise in any desperate mode to move on from Cousins, and I don't think they should be. I could see them taking a quarterback in the middle rounds, someone who could be a little more of a legitimate project / potential future starter, more than Nate Stanley. I hope we draft a quarterback just because that means Sean Mannion probably won't be back, because I have no use for him. But yeah, so the quarterback thing ain't gonna happen this year. The whole fan base was fantasizing all last year. Oh my God, we're gonna tank for Trevor. We're gonna fail for Fields. We're gonna lose for Lance. Like, we're not gonna end up with any of those guys. And guess what? In a couple cases, you're gonna look back very soon and be like, "Oh, I'm really glad we didn't end up with those guys." So I don't think the quarterback thing is happening in the first round. I really don't. Overall, then, throughout the draft, again, we're going to end up with more than 10 picks because we always do. The need. Everyone knows the needs. The needs are offensive line, tackles and guards. Maybe even a center, because you could even draft a center, and you could shift Bradbury to a guard. Although that's what they did with Elflein, and then Elflein just went in the tank after they started kind of screwing with him. So I don't know if they'd want to repeat that with a first round pick. But obviously pass rush is still a need. Although you have options, I think, aside from Hunter. Obviously, I personally would love to see what D.J. Wanham can do with a real player on the other end. Interior defensive line now I think is pretty set because you signed Tomlinson for multiple years. You've got Pierce for multiple years. I don't think that's a huge need anymore. I could see them drafting somebody for depth, but I don't think that's a huge need. They will definitely draft secondary players. Cornerback is, they'll first. I would bet $100,000. I don't have $100,000, but I'll bet it anyway that they draft at least one cornerback in the draft. Probably a safety. I could certainly see them drafting a safety. Linebackers, maybe. Linebackers, they could draft somebody that's not a huge priority. Barr might be gone next year, so you might want to draft someone and kind of get ready for that. Receiver, I think they're going to, odds are pretty good they're going to draft somebody at receiver at some point. But, I don't know if that's a huge need. That might be like hey, somebody falls in your lap in the 3rd or 4th round. Hey, let's grab him. Tight end, I don't think they have a huge need for. Obviously, running back, I don't think. I don't know what the point would be in drafting a running back because, you've got Cook, you've got Madison. I don't think anyone you would be drafting this year would supplant either of them, so why bother? Maybe a late rounder, somebody falls in your lap. It's like, hey, let's grab this guy. He can be a new Mike Boone or something, but I don't think that's going to happen. What else? I don't think they're going to draft a kicker, but I'm not ruling it out. That's another one that the fan base will lose their fucking mind if, in the 6th round or something, we see that they drafted a kicker. Because as of now, they only have the one kicker Joseph, and he hasn't kicked that much in the NFL, so I could see them maybe drafting a kicker. And look, if you draft a kicker late in the draft, there's nothing wrong. Like if you draft a good kicker, that's absolutely worth a late round pick. People really don't want to hear this, but Blair Walsh was a good draft pick. It ended very badly, but he was a good draft pick at the time. I mean, he was a Pro Bowl kicker as a rookie. Like, he got you in the playoffs. That was a good pick. The extension that you gave him, that was the mistake. But I could maybe see them drafting a kicker. I wouldn't be, I guess Zimmer's kind of come out and said that he regrets what happened with Daniel Carlson. But we'll see. Maybe he's softened on kickers, although that's another narrative that just drives me nuts, that Zimmer is personally responsible for kickers missing. Like, Mike Zimmer had nothing to do with Dan Bailey costing us the Tampa Bay game last year. Like, just shut up about this stuff. I hope we nail this draft, because we really nailed it last year, and it's one of those things. We nailed the draft last year, but we had a worse record. It's just kind of how that works. But one of the few bright spots is we got a lot of those guys who maybe wouldn't have played much. We got them a lot more experience. I think we got a few players in the late rounds last year that look like they can really play. Like, I think Harrison Hand looks like he can play a little bit. Obviously, Wanham looks like he can play. So those guys, some of these guys wouldn't have played much if we had a normal season. So at least we got that out of it. But if we fucking nail this draft again, like, they've done a really good job filling holes, making good moves this offseason. Like, they can be very, very good this next season. And sometimes it's cyclical. You hit on a draft one year, and then the next year it's maybe not as good. But obviously last year we had 2 first-round picks, so the odds that we could hit were better. This year we really got to nail that first pick. I think. I think the success or failure of this draft really is going to rest on whoever we take with that first one, because barring any significant wheeling and dealing, we won't be picking again until late in day 2. So there's a lot of guys who are gonna go off the board by then, and maybe we could trade up, even swap a couple thirds, move up into the second, get somebody. But I think it's really going to depend on that first round pick. And if I had to make a prediction right now, I would say that yes, we are going to take an offensive lineman. I feel like there's going to be enough guys there that they can pick between, and maybe even trade down and get a little extra draft capital. But I mean, it certainly seems like it's going to fall in a good way for the Vikings, where they can kind of have the best of both worlds. They can fill the position of need and get a best player available type, with their first round pick. I'm rooting for you, Rick. I'm one of your biggest supporters around here. I think he has done an excellent job most of the time here. Nobody wants to hear that, because they just want to complain about how he hasn't won a Super Bowl and how he's missed on a couple of first round picks and hasn't always built a great offensive line. I mean, everyone's got their bad spots. That's his. He's done better. He got us Brian O'Neill. I still think Bradbury's going to be good. Ezra Cleveland, I think, is going to be good. He got us Justin Jefferson last year. So I think I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic that we're going to have a good draft, and we're going to get a few more linemen to throw in the mix. So everyone whining that we're going to start Dakota Dozier again. I guarantee Dakota Dozier will not be starting He will not be. I've said it before. He will not be on the roster week 1. But yeah, I think I think we're going lineman first round, and then I think we are. I think primarily going to focus more on offense than defense, just because I don't think there's that many defensive roster positions really that are going to be open. Like we're not going to be. We can't afford to draft 7 or 8 defensive players. There's just not the roster space. So yeah, I guess that's about it. So we'll see what happens. We'll get some new weapons in the arsenal as we go retake the NFC North.